Ravenloft is one of the most atmospheric settings ever created, but you don't have to run a full Ravenloft campaign to do it. In fact, you can drop Ravenloft-style horror directly into Greyhawk, and I'm going to show you how. Today on Greyhawk Grognard. The whole idea of this is that Ravenloft is not a place. It is a flavor. It is a tone, a genre, a structure. It's think of it like a lens through which you can view Greyhawk. And that way you're going to be able to introduce Ravenloft-esque horror into your Greyhawk campaign. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. The first is to create isolated little domains of horror inside Greyhawk, little pockets of Ravenloft-esque horror that are just scattered about the Flness. You could do this a couple of different ways. You could have just like an isolated valley out in the Cairn Hills. You could have some fog-shrouded forest somewhere, some tiny place, a decaying manor outside a small village. Any place you can do this, but you want to keep it small. You want to keep it contained because you're not running a Ravenloft campaign, right? It's not the whole Flness. It's not Ravenloft. It's a little pocket that the players have stumbled into in the greatest tradition of like a Hammer horror film. And you want it to feel cut off, kind of like, the dark old house motif, where, the world is out there, but the world is cut off because your whole universe is focused on this one small place and you're trapped in it. Now, one way you can do this, and it's really important that you don't overuse this idea, is that you can use the mists themselves. If you're familiar with Ravenloft, the mists are how creatures go from outside of Ravenloft into one of the dread domains of Ravenloft. The Vistani can use them to travel between domains and so forth. But you really don't want to overuse this idea because, one, the players will glom onto it right away. They're going to see the mist, they walk through them, they're someplace else, they're going to know exactly what's going on if they know anything about Ravenloft. But if you use it sparingly, like it just does a one shot, maybe a Halloween special adventure that you're doing, then it could work really cool, really well. And the reason you use the mist, it isolates the players, right? Just like we were talking about. You want to create this little mini universe that the players are trying to escape from. You're basically putting them into a mini dread domain. And I wouldn't use one of the existing ones, right? Because this is still Greyhawk, and the idea is to trap them in there until the problem is solved. And what that problem is, we're going to get to in just a few seconds. Now, another concept you can use is basically put in a mini dreadlord. Into this place, and remember, these things they're stackable. You could use one and not the other. You can use all of them together. You can pick and choose which of these things you want. But if you take a figure, some Strahd equivalent or something like that, and you put them in this little pocket of Greyhawk, then you're well on your way to making this little mini Ravenloft inside your Greyhawk. And the thing to remember with these sorts of figures is that they have a tragic backstory, or they have some personal curse, or they're obsessed with something or someone. Just like Strahd is obsessed with the love of his life across the eons, and Azerlan um, uh, is obsessed with getting back to Greyhawk and penetrating the mists and so forth. You have these grand obsessions, these grand focuses, and their personal that tie into their personal backstory and their and whatever curse they might have upon themselves, even if it's a self-imposed curse. And the obvious one is a vampire lord from a house in like the Great Kingdom that is no longer in favor. There's a mad wizard who wants to become immortal, turning himself into a lich. Even the quest for lichdom can become this obsession, and that would fit in really, really well with Greyhawk because there's a lot of powerful liches around there. Or some cleric was abandoned by their deity and is now obsessed with getting back their favor or getting revenge on the deity. So there's a couple of different ways that you can go about this to establish that. Again, it's all about the flavor. You want that looming Dark Lord there who has his own story, and his story is impacting the players. That's the key. And just as a reminder, this is obviously a video about Ravenloft style horror, but I have in fact written my own horror book, uh, Swords of Cthulhu. It's Lovecraftian horror, so it's slightly different genre, a little more sci-fi, a little less gothic horror. But there's plenty of stuff in here that you can use in a game like this. If you wanted to bring in some aspects of ancient horrors that are lurking just beyond the corner of your eye. It's got races and classes and magic items and monsters and spells and good stuff like that. So just a reminder that if you're interested in this sort of thing, you might want to check out Swords of Cthulhu. It's available on Drive-Thru. I shall put a link below. Now let's go back to Ravenloft. Now, something you can do, and this is important across the board, is that you want to shift the tone and not the rules. There's plenty of good rules in Ravenloft, but you don't need to use them, and you can use it just by changing the tone of how you set things. You want to change the descriptions. You want to change the pacing. You want to change the state. You want to use silence, and silence grows tension, and the players are going to lose their minds if you just use silence. You limit information, right? I mean, there's all kinds of limits on spell casting in Ravenloft. You could have some, if they want to use divination to find out what's going on, maybe there's something interfering with that divination. In my new Book of Lost Lore 2, there's spells that deliberately do that. Maybe there's some anti-divination bubble across the where they are or whatever. And you also want to make the consequences of their actions personal to the characters. All right, it's not just you're not just killing a vampire. You are the vampire is going to make some kind of personal connection to these characters, and it's going to play on them, and it's going to make the stakes really real for them. And I want to expand on this because this is a really important point. In Greyhawk, it's adventure, right? It's high adventure and sort of a grittier feel. But in Ravenloft, what you're going for isn't adventure; it's dread, and you want to change the way that the players are thinking just for this adventure. This is not you're not running a Ravenloft campaign. You are running a Ravenloft style adventure in Greyhawk. And so in Greyhawk, normally, the players are going to explore, they're going to solve problems, they're going to get advantages and wealth and so forth. In Ravenloft style play, the players are going to feel like something's watching them at all times. The information isn't always certain, right? There's a level of uncertainty, and even when they get a win, it's not a complete win; it's a partial win, and it comes with consequences, and that's where it gets back into you want to make it personal for the players. So in Greyhawk, in a normal Greyhawk, you enter the ruined chapel and three ghouls attack. You know what it is. You know the threat. There's an immediate boom. Let's go. Let's start rolling initiative, and there's a tactical problem to be solved. In Ravenloft, it works a little differently. And then again, this is a technique you can use anytime, but you don't want to overuse it, right? Because you're not running a Ravenloft campaign, but you can use these tactics to inject this feel into it. And the way this works in the Ravenloft-esque style, the chapel doors hang open. Uh, there is silence. Pews are covered in dust, except for one. You hear something chewing. Now, what have you done? You have not clearly identified the threat, but you've signaled that there is, in fact, a threat out there. You're adding sensory details other than the visual, right? It's not you see three ghouls. It's you hear the chewing. You see the dust. And you're already creating unease because they know something's going on, but they don't know what it is. And that's a much more dreadful description of the encounter than you would normally otherwise have. And again, with the Greyhawk, I'm sorry, with the Ravenloft style, you don't want to just give out the information. right? The villagers tell you that the Baron is a vampire. Okay, now we know what the threat is, and it's a problem, and now we know what we have to overcome. If you're using the Ravenloft tone in Greyhawk, it's the villagers won't say the Baron's name. One woman whispers, "He doesn't come out during the day." Another says, "He saved us." And now, what do you got? What's going on? Is it bad? Is it a vampire? But the one guy said they saved him. So there's something more going on here. There's layers and there's uncertainty, and that's going to build tension in the players, not and their characters, but the players themselves are going to start feeling like, okay, something's going on, and that ties into the idea of the Dreadlord, the Dark Lord, being this real fleshed out character with his own story and his own personal baggage, his personal curses that he's trying to overcome, his obsession, and it's something is going on. So you're turning he's a vampire into he doesn't come out at night. He's bad. He's good. What's going on? And that's what you want to do. You want to keep them hopping from foot to foot. Now, another way you can do this in a in a regular one, in a regular Greyhawk campaign, there's a necromancer and he's raising undead to conquer the kingdom. Okay, fine. Okay, you know what it is, you know the threat, you know the what you have to do, you know what's going on. Let's turn that into a Ravenloft-esque type description. The lord of the manor is still hosting lavish dinner parties, although no one has ever seen the guests leave, and he insists his wife is still alive, although no one has seen her in many months. Now what's going on? You know something awful's going on, but you're not certain. You're creating that uncertainty again, that dread, and you're focusing. What is his obsession? His obsession is creating undead to conquer the kingdom. Denial. He's even denying it to himself. Of course, my wife is still alive, even though maybe she's not quite. And it's delving into personal tragedy. Now you're looping the wife in. Okay, that adds an emotional relevance, an emotional resonance to the character, and you're starting to layer it and build it up into something bigger than it actually than it would have been otherwise. And another tool you can use to do this is you slow things down. You want to check the pacing because in Greyhawk, in regular D&D, things can just go bop 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 bop. You want to let the you want to let the characters and the players kind of absorb the feel, and you do that by slowing down, by tapping the brakes. Um, it's not you search the room and you don't find anything. It's you search the room and there's a mirror that's covered except for one corner, and something is scratched into the glass uh, behind it. And now it doesn't have to really mean anything, but you're deliberately slowing things down to give the feeling time to work. And I talked about this already. The silence. You hear footsteps, but when you go upstairs, you don't see anything. Just that one little putting those pauses in there. The players want you to go and now don't overdo it. You don't want to go full Shatner on this, but because eventually, if you do it too much or too long, it's going to get annoying. But when you're doing it at the right moment, you just hit that moment. You're tapping the brakes, and you're doing that with silence, and silence becomes anticipation on the part of the players. And those are some of the tools that you want to use for this. And we talked about making the consequences feel personal. And this can be a little tricky to do, especially if you've got a real murder hobo hack and slash group. But there's still ways you can work it in, even if they're even against their will. Now, normally, you would say the village was attacked by werewolves. Some of the villagers were killed. Okay, fine. That's straightforward. You know what's going on. But let's turn that into a more Ravenloft-esque tone. The innkeeper you spoke to last night is among the dead, and his daughter won't speak to you now. She just serves you silently, glaring. You've now turned an impersonal, okay, the werewolves attack the village, into something very personal because it's literally affecting them. It might not have a big effect on how the adventure goes, but it's a little thing, and now they're slowly becoming tied into these villagers. You don't want the innkeeper's daughter mad at you. We can do something about that. And the other thing we've talked about is you want to keep victory is never final, right? In a normal Greyhawk game, okay, you kill the vampire and the curse is lifted all over the village. Fine. But in a Ravenloft style tone, it's a lot less certain. The vampire is destroyed, but the villagers are still locking their doors at night, and the manor isn't empty. So there was that leaves that lingering sense of unease. There's something in there. Okay, we thought we thought we destroyed everything. Obviously, something is still there. Do we want to press on and go in? The ideally they don't. Ideally, they leave it or they hear about it after the fact, right? They've already left the village, and then word reaches them that the villagers are still knocking. There we go. The villagers are still locking their doors at night, and there are rumors that the manor house where the vampire lived is not quite empty. And there we go. And that's the key. That's how you want to give that sort of uncertainty of victory at the end of the adventure. Now, one other thing that you can do, and this is kind of the easy one. This is the low hanging fruit of the concept. Is Ravenloft has tons of really great monsters, and you don't need an excuse to bring in a Ravenloft monster into your Greyhawk campaign. For example, the evil elementals that they have in I forget which Ravenloft compendium had them, but they have these. It's like a grave elemental or a pyre elemental or something like that, and they're just so cool. And the way I would use those, and the way I have used them, is if let's say you for whatever reason you're in a graveyard and you have to summon an earth elemental. Well, it's going to turn out to be a grave elemental by just because of where you did it. And there's ways you can, other ways you can work that kind of thing in. And the other thing I especially love, and there's tons of great monsters you can do this with, but I also really love the demi-human vampires that they have. Like halfling vampires will drain charisma, and what is it? Elven vampires will drain dexterity or something. They were just kind of alternate versions of the standard vampire, and I just love that concept that different vampires do different kinds of things to you, and that's a great way of personalizing the vampires because for monsters, especially in Ravenloft, they shouldn't just be generic mooks. You want them to have a personal feel. They're going to have that tragic backstory. They're going to have that obsession. But if you tie that with some unique game mechanics, it can really stand out. What could be a good NPC into a great one. And this actually brings up an interesting point. I want to expand a little bit on the whole idea of the monsters, Ravenloft-esque monsters. And one of the principles you can apply is that you don't want to add more monsters. You just want one memorable one. So rather than, the forest has werewolves and vampires and ghosts and stuff wandering around in it all of a sudden. You want to have one monster in that, as the focus because you want to have that monster have a personality. And remember, we talked about it's got an obsession, it's got a history, it's got a curse because in Greyhawk, monsters are going to have ambition, right? Ayuz wants to dominate the Flaness. Vecna wants to establish himself as a god. They have goals, and Ravenloft monsters don't usually have goals except ones that are uh, tied to their obsession. So it's Ravenloft monsters have punishments for their sins that they committed in life or after their translation into whatever they are. And that's what you should try to, when you're running this kind of Ravenloft-esque game, you want to fit that into their backstory. It's not just that they have a goal; it's that they have a goal that's tied to their curse, which is their punishment for why they are what they are. So, you have the vampire, the vampire is attacking travelers at night on the road. No, the the vampire is attacking travelers on the road who remind him of his family that he lost decades ago, and he hates himself because he does it. He has got an obsession, a compulsion to do this, and then afterwards he hates himself for what he's done. That is a epic Ravenloft-esque monster idea. It gives the monster a reason for doing what it's doing, but it also adds an element of tragedy and loss. The curse defines the behavior, not just the backstory. Uh, and you want to key the players to the idea that, yes, there's a monster at work here. But you do it subtly, right? You don't just say, "Oh, you're attacked by a werewolf." No, you don't. You say, in the village, the livestock has been found drained of blood, but not eaten, or the villager chained himself in the cellar last night, and nobody can figure out why. There's scratches on the doors from the inside of the cellar. You give clues. Okay, we know that there's something going on. Is it a vampire? Is it something else? No, no, it's a werewolf, because you gave them clues leading up to the attack. They knew something was going to be happening. Um, you want to tie the setting, the monster into the setting. Um, Now in Ravenloft, in actual Ravenloft, this is very easy because they have their domains. Each dreadlord is literally tied to a domain, and it reflects his personality. It's a little harder to do that in Greyhawk for the kind of thing we're talking about, but you can still do it. And this is where a knowledge of Greyhawk history comes into, because you can take the trope of the vampire nobleman and tie it, and like we talked about, tie it into the history of some long forgotten noble house, but he doesn't forget because he remembers it. He remembers being a part of it. And that noble house is used to be very respected in Furiondi or Valuna or whatever, and now the other nobles, it's just not talked about in polite society. Things like that. You can tie the villain into a some battle that happened years and years ago. Maybe he lost his family in the battle, or his son or whatever was just was slain or something, and that drives his obsession. Now he's a ghost and he wants to get revenge on the people who killed his son, but they're all long dead, so he takes it out on others. There's ways you could do that and tie it into the setting and the history of the setting. Um, and the thing, and we touched on this before too, is that there should be a certain degree of ambiguity about these great monsters, and that's driven by the attitudes of the NPCs about the monster. So it's not just that, oh, the entire village is living in fear and terror of this dread of their dread lord who comes out at night. No, some of them like him. Some of them don't want him destroyed. He's protecting it, or they're protecting him. And some of the villagers want to see the vampire destroyed. Some of them don't want to see the vampire destroyed, and then you have to figure out why. Why would they want to keep that? They feel protective of him because they see him as protecting the village from outside forces. And then one NPC is going to split off and knows the truth, but he won't talk to the PCs, and they have to convince him. There's all kinds of cool ways you could turn this into some great role playing. It's not just combat; it's moral dilemma that you have to that you're dealing with when you're dealing with these well-developed Ravenloft-esque monsters. And like we said, you don't want to just blurt it out. Oh, there's a vampire here. No, you want to give little clues, and you want to establish ambiguity because it couldn't possibly be a vampire if half the village wants to keep him. So there's that there's that thing there. But uh, in all of this, yes, we are trying to establish that veil of Ravenloftness on top of Greyhawk, but never forget that it is that you are in fact playing in Greyhawk. So Greyhawk is grounded. It is political. It is practical. You don't want to turn the entire campaign into a Ravenloft campaign because otherwise you might just well be playing Ravenloft. You don't want to remove player agency. You're giving them player agency, but you're personalizing it and you're tying it to real world consequences. And there's ambiguity around there, but you're still giving the players agency. And you also don't want to have this happening all the time, right? This is a localized thing. This is the one manor house outside the village. It's the one isolated forest on the borderland. It's the one lonely valley, miles from civilization. That's where this stuff is happening. It's not across the board, unless you're in the Great Kingdom after the after the fall of Roxy's, but that's a whole different story. That is a different kind of horror. So if you want to run an adventure like this, there's a quick little checklist. Every scene you should be asking yourself these 4 questions. Am I revealing too much too quickly? Can I add one slightly unsettling detail? Just something to throw the players off a little bit. And eventually they'll get the idea that they're not supposed to be like bloodhounds and track down every single little thing that you say. Can I delay the obvious? And how can I make this personal for the player characters? Those 4 things, and I think you'll get a real good feel for how to bring these elements of Ravenloft into your Greyhawk campaign. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Like I say, I've been doing some experimentation with the format of my videos. Please do let me know in the comments. Do you like the new format with the shorter little cutscenes? Of course, what did you think of the idea itself of bringing in that Ravenloft material into Greyhawk? I've done it before, and it really is a cool effect. So, but again, you can't overdo it. So, hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to you all later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.